When you think of Nintendo, there are four series that immediately come to mind: Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, and Smash Bros. These are easily Nintendo's biggest franchises and are pretty much guaranteed to appear on each console and handheld at least once. Besides all being quality series that are super fun to play, they have one other thing in common: that they are all drastically different with very little to no overlap. The main Mario series are the platforming games, and while he's dabbled with other genres like RPGs and sports games, platforming is what he's known for. The Zelda series are the action-adventure games with large open worlds. There is some light platforming in these games, but it's mostly automatic when going past a ledge or climbing things. It's pretty much never press A to make Link jump, unless you're talking about Zelda 2. Would have been in that idea, we'll come back to it later. Pokemon is Nintendo's main RPG series, whether it's the main series of handheld titles, the Mystery Dungeon games, or the console Stadium, Coliseum, and Battle Revolution games. Yeah, there's a bit of overlap with the Mario RPGs with this one, but Pokemon is where Nintendo does most of their RPGs. Finally, Smash Bros. Is Nintendo's fighting game juggernaut. The series has been on every console since the Nintendo 64 and was also on the 3DS, and is Nintendo's flagship crossover series, combining all their IPs together in one place, along with other video game legends, making it gaming's largest crossover series. Each of these series encompass a specific genre, and I think this has been carefully planned out by Nintendo.
Designing series to be known for one specific genre helps give the games their own identity, as well as gives incentive to people to buy games in each of the game series. This is something that Nintendo has worked for years to achieve, as, for the most part, their games on the NES and Super Nintendo were mostly just platformers.
Zelda 2, Metroid, Donkey Kong, Yoshi, Kirby, all of these games were platformers, but now most of Nintendo's series have their own identity. However, look at the roster of Smash Bros., specifically the Nintendo characters. Each of these characters belong to a game series that was, or still is, a series that has their own genre. The question is, where are the games?
Originally this video was going to be just about the first Pikmin game, however, while I was replaying it I got to thinking, Nintendo has so many IPs, yet they never really seem to utilize any of them. Nintendo's IPs have been used on a variety of levels over the years, some as often as the big four, some every once in a while, and some have been forgotten. And I think one of the deciding factors in this is this idea that each game series needs to be its own game genre. So let's go through some of Nintendo's IPs and see why they have succeeded, why they failed, and for the newer ones, see whether they will succeed or will fail based on these parameters. For the purposes of this video, the Mario series is going to include the Donkey Kong and Yoshi games, as those feel more like spin-offs of Mario than their own series. And we're also not going to go over every Nintendo IP because that's going to get ridiculous fast. Also, to simplify things a bit and to hop onto a trend that's already dead at this point, we're going to put everything into this pseudo-tier list here, because why not? So in the guaranteed to last tier we have the big four, so let's look at some other series to help fill in this tier list.
Let's start with Pikmin, as that's what this video was originally about. We all know what Pikmin is, we've all heard the story of how it started as a tech demo for the GameCube before becoming its own game. I'd honestly be more surprised if you're watching this without knowing that already, but that's not what this video is for. The game itself is a real-time strategy game, having you use Pikmin to collect parts of Olimar's ship. The different Pikmin have different abilities, with red being fire resistant and the best fighters, yellow are able to carry bombs and get extra height when thrown, and blue are immune to water. The game is a great real-time strategy game, and was my introduction to the genre. The series has only had 3 main titles and 1 spin-off that wasn't received too well. Looking at how the first 3 games released, Pikmin 1 and 2 both released on the GameCube, and then got re-released on the Wii, and Pikmin 3 was released on the Wii U nearly 10 years since 2's original release. Shigeru Miyamoto has stated that a 4th main series Pikmin game is in progress, so the series isn't dead. I'd say that Pikmin will likely get more games in the future, as Nintendo has nothing else to fill in the real-time strategy genre.
Pikmin's going into this tier I've called not quite a big series, as it hasn't had that many games yet. However, I don't see it dying anytime soon, as it fills in the original game genre requirement that Nintendo seems to have.
Let's look at another GameCube original, Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing is a life simulation series where you live as the only human in a town of animals. The series has had games on the GameCube, Wii, DS, 3DS, Wii U, and even on mobile devices. I think it's safe to say this series will also last, and could be considered as Nintendo's 6th largest franchise.
We'll get to 5th in a bit.
Also, the series just got a game released on the Switch, so I'd say it's doing just fine.
Animal Crossing is going into the same tier as Pikmin, although it has more games, but I feel like it can become a guaranteed to last series real soon. It just needs a few more games and a little bit more longevity to it.
Splatoon is a relatively new IP from Nintendo, and is a competitive third-person shooting game. It first appeared on the Wii U of all consoles, yet it was a great success, and a sequel was released for the Switch. With it being so new, you'd maybe think that it would be hard to predict how long the series will last for, but I feel like it's a safe bet that it will soon become a Nintendo staple. The series has had a ton of support from Nintendo, and its competitive scene is pretty active, with tournaments that may one day rival Smash Bros. In size and scale.
I think it's safe to say we'll probably see a Splatoon game on each of the Nintendo consoles going forward, so it's going into the up-and-coming tier, as it's still relatively new. However, I can see this becoming a Nintendo staple really soon. So we've got a lot of series filling up the top tiers of this list, but what about the bottom tiers? Well, on the bottom tier we have the dead tier, home to series that have no chance of coming back. And in this tier I have 3 series: Ice Climbers, F-Zero, and Mother. Let me explain.
Ice Climbers is pretty obvious, as they've had only one game that released for the NES, and at most all they've had since are re-releases, and that's it. This is likely because it's a platforming game, which we've established as Mario's turf, and I guess Nintendo couldn't come up with any more ideas for it. This begs the question of why they're even in Smash Bros., as they've had just the one game and no other impact. But, I mean, you could honestly say that for other characters in Smash, so let them live on in Smash Bros. Let's also use the Ice Climbers entry as just every NES game that got pretty much the one game, the Clu Clu Lands and the Mach Riders of Nintendo's history. F-Zero is potentially Nintendo's greatest tragedy, as it had so much potential but had so few games. The series started on the Super Nintendo and had sequels on the N64 and GameCube. The series also had some handheld releases and had some Japan-only expansions, but the series hasn't seen a new title since 2004. I think the reason for F-Zero's absence is that Nintendo has focused more on Nintendo's other racing series, Mario Kart. If Nintendo already has a successful racing series, then given what we've seen so far, they'd have no incentive to have another around. Also, with regards to Mario Kart, Nintendo is double dipping into the Mario audience, which in turn makes them more profit from general fans of Mario, whereas if they continued F-Zero, that series probably wouldn't sell as well since they'd only have the racing game audience, and not racing game and Mario fans for one game. Of course, this is all speculation on my part, but it seems like Nintendo determines what games and series to make based on what they already do and what they haven't done yet. As for Mother, it was an RPG series that started on the Famicom, had a sequel on the Super Famicom and SNES, and a third game on the Game Boy Advance. The thing about the series is that only Mother 2, or as it's known in the States, Earthbound, was the only one to get a US release during the original run of the series. Mother 1 got a re-release for the Wii U in 2015 called Earthbound Beginnings, but Mother 3 has yet to receive an official US release. For whatever reason, Nintendo was hesitant for this series in the US, and still kinda remains so to this day. Currently there are no plans for a 4th Mother game, but that's more so because the creator of the series, Shigesato Itoi, doesn't want to continue it. However, let's be real, if there was a Mother 4, Nintendo would still probably hold off on a US release, for whatever reason. Who knows, maybe they don't want to distract from Pokemon. Honestly, it's anyone's guess at this point.
This tier is pretty much home to game series that have more appearances in Smash Bros. Than they do actual games. Now you may be saying, but Ben, Kid Icarus has more appearances in Smash Bros. Than they do actual games, and there are other dead series besides these 3, and you're right. This is where things get complicated. Basically the way I see it is that there's multiple levels of dead a game series can be. There's Dead Dead, where the game series has no chance of returning whatsoever, and then there's Dead but Not Buried, which basically means that the game series has been dormant for a really long time, and it's not likely that they're going to see a game in the near future, but there's still that small chance that they might return, and that's the tier I have dubbed as The Void. And in the void are Kid Icarus and Punch-Out.
Both Kid Icarus and Punch-Out have similar histories, which is why they're in this tier. Kid Icarus was an action platforming game for the NES, and it got a sequel for the Game Boy, but it then proceeded to get nothing else for 2 decades. The next appearance of Pit was in Brawl, and then finally the series got a new entry on the 3DS in 2012 with Kid Icarus Uprising. Punch-Out started with some arcade titles, and then had releases on both the NES and Super Nintendo, but then also went on a long hiatus until 2009, and then Little Mac made his Smash Bros. Debut in 2014. What's bizarre about the absence of these games is that they don't break the no overlapping genres rule. Kid Icarus Uprising was a mix of both on-rail shooting and action genres, and Punch-Out has always been an arcade fighting game, which I'd say is different enough from Smash Bros., which is more of a party fighting game. Even though these series haven't had a game for a while, after the previous hiatuses they've had, I hesitate to call them dead because of their resurgence in the Smash Bros. Series, so who knows, maybe Nintendo will bring them back every once in a while. Then again, look at Ice Climbers and F-Zero, so it's probably 50-50 whether or not these series will make a return.
Now we come to the trickiest tier to classify, the Who Knows tier, as it's anyone's guess as to what's happening with these game series. In this tier, I have put the Metroid series and the Star Fox series, and the reason I put them in this tier is because they haven't seen too much action in recent years. However, they have enough history behind them that I can't quite say that they're either dead or in the void.
The Metroid series started as another platforming series on the NES, going back to that everything on the NES was a platformer thing, but it had a big change and boom period during the GameCube and Wii era. Beginning with Metroid Prime, the series has shifted into a first-person shooter game, and has pretty much stayed that way since, save for a few handheld titles and spin-offs. This is the only first-person shooting series Nintendo has now, but the last major release for the series was in 2010. There was a spin-off game for the 3DS in 2016, and a remake of Metroid 2 in 2017, but compared to the number of games released during the height of the series, this is concerning to see. Nintendo has confirmed it's working on Metroid Prime 4 for the Switch, but there hasn't been a release date revealed yet, and development was restarted in 2019 when the project was picked up by Retro Studios. Star Fox is also a strange case, as it's had a sporadic history. Star Fox started on the Super Nintendo, had a cancelled sequel, and was continued on the N64. It then had 2 games on the GameCube, one of which strayed a bit from the dogfighting gameplay the series was known for, then a DS game in 2006. After that, there was nothing on the Wii, a remake of Star Fox 64 for the 3DS in 2011, and then Star Fox Zero for the Wii U, which received mixed to poor reviews. The cancelled sequel Star Fox 2 was finally released with the SNES Classic Edition, but the series has just been inconsistent with its releases. It's just so bizarre that Nintendo doesn't do more with the series, as its dogfighting gameplay genre is unique for Nintendo and hasn't really been done by anything else that Nintendo's made.
Unless, of course, you count Pilot Wings, which, while we're at it, Pilot Wings goes into the dead tier. It's had 3 games in 30 years. Sorry, Pilot Wings fans.
Metroid and Star Fox are just the strangest cases of Nintendo not utilizing their IPs. Both series have long histories and have unique genres in comparison to the rest of Nintendo's library, but they've just been absent for most of the past decade. I'm sure Nintendo hasn't given up on these franchises. Like I said earlier, they've confirmed Metroid Prime 4, but it seems like these games are just not high on Nintendo's list of priorities.
In fact, upon further reflection, I'm going to move Pikmin down to the Who Knows tier, as a Pikmin 4 is probably going to happen at some point, but let's face it, the series is never going to be as big as Animal Crossing is, or as Metroid and Star Fox were. Okay, so we're down to our last 2 series, and they're both going to go into the guaranteed to last tier. I think you know which 2 I'm talking about.
Fire Emblem as a series has been around since the Famicom, and has had quite the number of releases over the years. The tactical RPG series didn't enter the US until The Binding Blade for the Game Boy Advance in 2003, but the series has been hugely popular, with characters from the series pretty much making up most of the Smash Bros. Roster.
Seriously, they should just change it to Fire Emblem the Fighting Game, featuring the rest of Nintendo.
Even though the series made a late appearance internationally, it definitely belongs in this tier as it has the longevity and appeal to back it up.
Now we move on to what is likely to be Nintendo's 5th largest IP, Kirby. Kirby fucking breaks this tier list and everything it's based on.
When you look at this list overall, it's clear that for the most part Nintendo tries to make their series as different from each other as possible. Mario is the platforming series, including Yoshi and Donkey Kong. Zelda is the adventure series. Pokemon is the traditional RPG series. Smash Bros. Is the fighting game series, Fire Emblem is the tactical RPG series, Animal Crossing is the life sim series, Splatoon is the third-person shooter series, and so on. Kirby throws all of this out the window and is another platforming series in Nintendo's toolkit. For whatever reason, Kirby, of all things, breaks this pattern. If I had to guess why, it's likely because of the series' unique gameplay of consuming enemies to get power-ups, and that the character is just adorable. It could also be that the Kirby series is generally easier than the Mario series, so it's something that's beginner friendly, and it's a way for Nintendo to be known for good platforming games overall, and not just Mario. This is all speculation on my part, but given how many of Nintendo's IPs used to be platformers, Metroid, Kid Icarus, even Zelda at one point, it's just bizarre that Kirby stayed as Nintendo's other platforming series.
And with that, this list is complete, and what a story it tells. So many of Nintendo's series that were once important parts of each console's lineup have ended up being forgotten, while others have just kind of never been given a chance to begin with. It seems like Nintendo's only really focused on the top half of this list, which is sad to see as there's still plenty of good series on the bottom half as well. It makes no sense too, as the series on this part of the list don't conflict genre-wise with the top of the list. Pikmin is a real-time strategy game series, Metroid went from a platforming action game series to a first-person series, Star Fox is aerial combat, and Kid Icarus was rebooted into an on-rails action game mix. These game series could be big hits if Nintendo would just give them the chance to be great. But instead it seems like they found the few things that are guaranteed to work and are mostly sticking with those. But hey, at least they're giving Splatoon a chance. Basically what I'm trying to say with this video is that Nintendo has a ton of game series at their disposal, and it'd be great if they remembered their other IPs and released a larger variety of games. But there's still one more question left unanswered. When is Duck Hunt 2 coming out?